Paris, 1572. The city of cathedrals and candles, the heart of a kingdom pulsing beneath its own glory. By day, Paris shone as the jewel of Christendom, but by night, it became a labyrinth of whispers, rot, and restless hunger. They called it La Fête Rouge, the blood feast. A night so drenched in sin that even the river Seine seemed to blush with shame. It began not with a massacre, but with a banquet. King Charles IX, barely 22, had summoned his nobles to the Palais du Louvre, a grand celebration to mark peace after decades of religious war. Yet, behind every smile at that long table waited a blade, or a secret thirst. Paris that night was hungry, not for food, but for vengeance. The city's nobles, their fortunes shattered by years of bloodshed, gathered to reclaim their power. But what began as feasting soon curdled into frenzy. A rumor spread through the corridors. The king has sanctioned the hunt. It started, they say, with a toast. A duke, drunk and proud, raised his goblet and cried, "Let us dine upon the traitors who dine with us." The jest froze the room. Then, as thunder cracked above the palace, laughter broke, wild, nervous, cruel. And so, the feast began anew. But this time, the laughter hit a scream. No one remembers who drew the first blade. Some say it was the Duke of Guise. Others whisper that it was the Queen Mother herself, Catherine de' Medici, who gave the silent nod. When the torches dimmed and the rain began to fall, the palace doors were barred, and the screams began to rise. It was not murder in haste. It was ritual. Each noble was offered a chalice, half wine, half blood, and told to drink to the king's eternal reign. Some refused, others trembled and obeyed, but those who tasted changed. Outside, the people of Paris waited, watching from the streets. Through the misted windows, they saw only flickers, silhouettes moving in circles, like dancers or demons. Then the shutters burst open, and crimson poured onto the stone. By dawn, the palace stank of iron and incense. The king sat alone at the head of the table, eyes hollow, fingers trembling against an untouched cup. He whispered, "Paris is clean again." But behind him, the shadows still moved. The feast was not over. In the days that followed, strange processions walked the Seine, nobles shrouded in veils, chanting psalms backward, carrying bowls of steaming wine through the fog. The city pretended not to see, but the rats grew fat. It became known, quietly, as the night nobility devoured their own. A whisper among priests, a warning to servants. Never trust a door locked from the inside. The bodies were never found, only rings, buttons, and bones, and those who had feasted were never seen in sunlight again. Years passed. The king's portraits grew pale, his gaze hollow. He would wake screaming at midnight, hearing laughter echoing through his chambers. In the archives of Saint-Denis, a single page remains, stained, marked with one phrase, "Nous avons mangé la paix." We have eaten peace. Then came the silence. Paris awoke to rain, a soft, gray drizzle that washed away the blood, but not the stench. In the courtyard, servants scrubbed stone, while priests whispered prayers to walls that no longer listened. The ravens did not leave for 3 days. The king's heralds called it an accident, a riot among guests. But those who were there, those who heard, carried the truth like a sickness behind their teeth. The feast had left more than corpses. It had left a mark. In the crypt beneath the chapel, monks found chalices fused to the altar, as if fire had kissed gold. On the wall, carved by desperate hands, were the words, "We drank what should not be drunk." To the outside world, the nobles had simply vanished. Their lands seized, their names struck from court records, their children told they never existed. But beneath the silence, the order of the feast remained. They met in abandoned wine cellars, cloaked in mourning black. They spoke of the Red Hour, of a promise bound in blood. Catherine de' Medici herself remained untouched. She kept a locked cabinet in her chamber, said to hold the chalice from that night, always half full, never evaporating, never empty. Visitors swore the air around it smelled of wet iron and violets. Then the city began to change. Shadows lingered longer in doorways. Rats grew large and bold. Fishermen pulled from the Seine things that were neither fish nor human. The church tried to intervene. 3 Dominican priests entered the Louvre chapel to bless it anew. Only one returned, his hair turned white, his eyes hollow. He spoke of a feast that had never truly ended. The king ordered the tunnels sealed. But Paris is an old city. Its stones remember what paper forgets, and the tunnels always find another way to breathe. By 1581, it was called the Hollow Feast. No guests, no invitations, only the sound, faint, metallic, like 1,000 knives scraping against silver plates. Those who walked the palace halls at night swore they could hear it through the walls. A banquet that wasn't there, but never stopped. A young servant vanished near the old kitchens. They found only her apron, soaked in something warm. The king ordered a mass at Notre Dame. But at the moment of consecration, every candle in the cathedral extinguished at once. In the weeks that followed, the king began to fade. His skin grew gray, his eyes hollow. He refused meat, drank only wine from the old chalice, and whispered names long erased from the royal line. Those closest to the crown began dying in their sleep. No wounds, no screams, only a faint scent of iron in the air and a single dark stain beneath their beds. They said the feast had chosen new guests. No one dared speak of La Fête Rouge, but in the taverns, drunk soldiers swore they'd seen pale figures walking the Seine, nobles with no faces, only crowns of bone. The blood feast had moved beyond one night. It had become a season of silence, hunger, and vanishing faces. The royal court dined less and prayed more, and the walls of Paris listened. Years later, long after the death of Charles IX, Paris learned to whisper differently. The feast had become legend, a bedtime terror told to frighten children. But in the old quarter, near the riverbanks, the stones still wept when it rained, and the people who had lived through the night never laughed the same way again. When King Henry III ascended the throne, he ordered the Louvre restored, its walls washed, its halls repainted, but nothing can cleanse history. The smell of damp blood lingered beneath the perfume of lilies. The new courtiers spoke of art, fashion, and progress, but at banquets, they ate in silence. The music never drowned out the echo of screams. A chronicler named Etienne de Beauvais tried to document what had happened. He gathered testimonies from servants, guards, and surviving clerics, piecing together what the crown had erased. He called his manuscript The Crimson Covenant, but the book never reached print. The morning before it was to be published, Etienne's body was found floating in the Seine, his hands burned black, his tongue missing. All copies of his work were seized and burned, all except one, hidden in the archives beneath the Cathedral of Saint-Denis, sealed in wax and iron. There it remained, whispering through the centuries. What that last copy contained is known only through fragments. It spoke of a second feast, a gathering not of nobles, but of those who had survived the first, broken servants, exiled knights, widowed women of the court, all drawn back to the same cursed hall. They came not to dine, but to repent. And yet, once again, something darker answered. In the manuscript's final pages, Etienne wrote, "They begged for forgiveness, but the floor drank faster than their prayers." No one knows what he meant. Some say the stone itself had become thirsty, a living altar feeding on guilt. By the dawn of the 17th century, a plague spread through the city. The poor called it divine punishment. The nobles called it coincidence. But among the few who still remembered La Fête Rouge, there was no doubt. It was the feast returning for what it was owed. Night after night, the bells of Saint Barthélemy rang by themselves, slow, hollow, mournful. Witnesses claimed they saw shapes moving along the rooftops, figures in gowns and crowns, their faces like melted wax, feasting on air.